Sometimes one single moment changes the rules of life. And for Nick and Noah, it wasn't a fight, it wasn't a secret. It was a kiss. A kiss so dangerous it crossed every line. But before we get there, you need to understand the fire that was already burning between them. Nick and Noah's world was never meant to collide in the way it did. They lived under the same roof, yet their lives couldn't have been more different. Nick, rebellious, wild, always on the edge of danger, moved like a storm through every room he entered. He was the kind of boy who broke rules without thinking, but somehow people followed him anyway. His leather jacket, his smirk, the way he carried himself. It all said one thing: he didn't care. But that wasn't true. Deep inside, Nick cared too much about the things he could never control. Then there was Noah Bright, determined, a little stubborn, but filled with a quiet strength. She had her own dreams, her own way of seeing the world. Unlike Nick, she wasn't trying to be reckless. She was just trying to survive in a new family she didn't choose. Her mother had remarried, and with that, Noah's life was thrown into a house that felt unfamiliar, where nothing seemed to belong to her anymore. Nick and Noah weren't friends, not at first. In fact, they clashed at every chance they got. Words that cut deep, sarcastic smiles, endless challenges thrown across the dinner table. But under all that tension was something neither of them wanted to admit, an attraction that grew stronger the more they tried to deny it. Every argument, every small fight, only pushed them closer to something neither of them could escape. This wasn't just sibling rivalry. This was something dangerous. Because in Culpa Mia, their story isn't about two people who were meant to be together. It's about two people who were never supposed to be. And yet, fate kept throwing them into the same moments, forcing them to see sides of each other no one else saw. Nick wasn't just the tough guy. He had scars, emotional ones, the kind he hid behind smirks and jokes. Noah wasn't just the good girl. She had fire in her heart, a fire that Nick couldn't look away from. When their eyes met, it was never just by chance. When silence fell between them, it wasn't empty. It was loaded, charged, ready to explode, and that's where the story begins. Not with love, not with tenderness, but with tension. The kind of tension that keeps you awake at night. The kind of tension that makes you wonder what would happen if one day someone finally stopped pretending. Because in their house, under one roof, every hallway became a battlefield. Every car ride felt like a test of how long they could last without giving in. Every stolen glance was a reminder of the truth they were running from. And the truth was simple: no matter how much they hated it, no matter how much they fought it. Nick and Noah were being pulled toward each other like two magnets, destined to collide. The world around them kept spinning, parents unaware, friends on the outside, rules standing in their way. But inside their hearts, something dangerous was already alive. And once you light a spark like that, you can't put out the fire. This was the stage. This was the beginning. A forbidden connection, a dangerous attraction, and a house too small to keep it hidden forever. And soon, everything they thought they knew about family, about right and wrong, about control, would be shattered. Because before the kiss that changed everything, there was this moment, the quiet, the chaos, the unspoken feelings they tried to bury. And all it would take was one step, one look, one touch, to set everything in motion. It started small, so small they almost convinced themselves it didn't matter. A glance that lasted too long, a brush of a hand that sent electricity rushing through their veins. Nick and Noah told themselves it was nothing. Just accidents. Just coincidence. But deep down, both of them knew it was becoming something much bigger than they could control. Nick was used to control. He lived on adrenaline, fast cars, late nights, and the thrill of danger. But Noah wasn't part of his world, at least. She wasn't supposed to be. She was supposed to be the untouchable stepsister, the girl who played by the rules, the one person he couldn't corrupt. And yet, every time she stood her ground against him, every time her stubbornness flared, Nick found himself pulled deeper into something he couldn't escape. For Noah, it was different. Nick was everything she told herself she hated: reckless, arrogant, impossible. And yet, when he walked into a room, her heartbeat betrayed her. When he leaned too close, every nerve in her body went on edge. She wanted to despise him. She tried to ignore him. But the truth was undeniable. There was a pull between them. Invisible but unbreakable, their days became a battlefield of temptation. At the breakfast table, their eyes would meet for just a second too long. In the car, the silence between them grew heavier with every mile, filled with words neither dared to say. At night, in the quiet of the house, they could hear each other moving through the halls, and the awareness of being so close, so near, was enough to keep them awake. Every fight they had was just fuel to the fire. Nick would tease her, push her buttons, make her furious. Noah would push back, her voice sharp, her glare unwavering. But underneath all that anger was something else, desire, raw and dangerous, hiding behind every word. Because what they really wanted wasn't to fight. It was to give in. The walls of their world were closing in. Their parents had no idea what was happening in the spaces between arguments. Their friends couldn't see the storm brewing inside them. To everyone else, Nick and Noah were just step-siblings who couldn't stand each other. But behind closed doors, the truth was different. Every second together was a test of how long they could last without crossing the line, and then came the moments they couldn't explain. The times when Nick's hand would brush against Noah's, and neither of them pulled away. The nights when they found themselves standing too close, breath against breath, as if gravity itself was forcing them together. The air between them was heavy, electric, alive with something forbidden. Noah tried to run from it. She told herself she couldn't want this, that it was wrong, that she had to stay away. But Nick wasn't the kind of storm you could outrun. He was relentless. And even when he wasn't trying, he was pulling her in, closer and closer, until she couldn't tell where the line was anymore. What made it worse was the tenderness hidden in the chaos. Nick wasn't just fire and danger. There were moments when Noah caught glimpses of something softer. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. The way his voice changed when he said her name. Those moments broke down every wall she tried to build. The tension became unbearable. Every day felt like walking on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the ground to crumble beneath them. And in their hearts, they knew it was only a matter of time. Because you can only fight gravity for so long. Nick and Noah weren't just two people living under the same roof anymore. They were two souls caught in a storm, two magnets being pulled together by a force they couldn't deny. The question wasn't if they would fall. The question was when and when they did, the world they knew, the rules, the boundaries, the safety of pretending would be gone forever, because sparks don't stay sparks forever. Sooner or later, sparks become fire. And for Nick and Noah, the fire was coming. There are moments in life that feel like they belong to someone else's story, moments you read about, moments you see in movies. But for Nick and Noah, this wasn't fiction. This was real. This was the night when the world finally stopped pretending. When everything between them boiled over into something that could never be taken back. It didn't begin with romance. It began with tension, the kind that had been building for weeks, maybe months. An argument, sharp words, raised voices, the kind of fight that cut too close to the truth. Noah had thrown every ounce of her anger at Nick, but her anger wasn't the real problem. It was the way her hands shook when he was near. It was the way her voice broke when he looked at her too long. And Nick, he wasn't angry at her words. He was angry at himself. Angry at how much he wanted her, how much he needed her. When he knew he shouldn't, they stood there, faces inches apart, hearts pounding like drums. The silence that followed wasn't calm. It was alive. The air felt thick, almost electric, like the house itself knew what was about to happen. Noah's chest rose and fell too fast. Her lips parted as if she wanted to speak but couldn't. Nick's jaw clenched, his hands curled into fists, as if he was holding back a force bigger than himself. Then came that split-second decision, the moment where time slowed. The universe held its breath, and neither of them could pretend anymore. Nick moved first, not with the recklessness people expected from him, but with something raw, almost desperate. His hand brushed against her cheek, hesitant, trembling, as if asking for permission without words. Noah didn't move away. She should have. Every rule in her life told her to. Every voice in her head screamed that this was wrong. But her heart betrayed her. She leaned into his touch, her breath catching in her throat. And in that instant, the last wall between them shattered. Their lips met. And the world disappeared. It wasn't soft, not at first. It was fierce, like a storm finally breaking after a long drought. Weeks of tension, months of denial, all of it poured into that kiss. Nick pulled her closer, his grip desperate, like he was afraid she would vanish if he let go. Noah clung to him, her body trembling, her heart racing faster than she thought possible. It was fire and ice, chaos and peace, everything at once, but beneath the fire there was something else. Something neither of them expected, tenderness, vulnerability, a kind of honesty they had never shared before. In that kiss they weren't enemies. They weren't step-siblings. They weren't breaking rules or defying fate. They were just two souls finally giving in to the truth they had been running from. The world outside didn't matter anymore. Not the rules, not the consequences, not the weight of what this meant. In that stolen moment, there was only them, hearts pressed together, lips trembling against each other, the sound of their breath filling the silence, and yet, as the kiss deepened, reality came rushing back. Because a kiss like this doesn't happen without a cost. When their lips finally parted, when their eyes met again, both of them knew the truth. Nothing would ever be the same. Noah's eyes shimmered with fear and longing. Nick's chest heaved, his face torn between guilt and need. They didn't say anything. They couldn't. Words were too small for what had just happened, but the silence was enough. Because in that silence, they both understood. The line they had crossed couldn't be erased. The kiss wasn't just a kiss, it was a choice. A choice to step into the fire, no matter how much it burned, and from that moment on, every look, every touch, every second together would carry the weight of what they had done. This was the turning point. The moment when their story changed forever. The kiss that wasn't supposed to happen. The kiss that changed everything. Asterisk, the kiss ended, but its echo stayed in the air like thunder after a storm. The room was the same, the house was the same, but nothing inside Nick and Noah felt the same anymore. They had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. What had been tension and denial before was now raw reality. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was heavy, trembling, alive with everything they had just done. Noah was the first to step back, but her body betrayed her. Her lips were still tingling, her chest still rising and falling too fast. She couldn't meet his eyes, because if she did, she knew she'd fall all over again. Her mind was screaming with guilt. This shouldn't have happened. This can't happen again, but her heart whispered something far more dangerous. You wanted this. You needed this. Nick stood frozen, torn in two. On one side was the reckless part of him, the part that didn't care about rules or consequences, the part that wanted nothing but her. On the other side was the quiet voice of fear, reminding him of everything at stake, their family, their lives, the fragile balance holding their world together. He had kissed her like she was the only thing that mattered, but now, standing in the aftermath, he realized just how much he had to lose. Their eyes met, and in that glance was 1,000 unspoken words. Noah's gaze was full of questions. What happens now? Who are we after this? Can we survive what we've just done? Nick's gaze carried the same fear, but also something more powerful, a vow, silent but unshakable. He wasn't going to let her go, not now, not after this. The hours that followed were unbearable. Every sound in the house felt too loud, every shadow too sharp. They moved through the rooms as if nothing had happened, but the truth clung to them like a secret only they could hear. Noah avoided his touch, but her body ached for it. Nick kept his distance, but his eyes never stopped finding her. Sleep didn't come easily that night. For Noah, every time she closed her eyes, she felt the heat of his lips again. For Nick, every time he tried to rest, he replayed the moment over and over, wondering if he should regret it, but knowing he never could. The kiss wasn't just a mistake. It was a beginning. And beginnings can't be undone. The next morning, nothing looked different, but everything felt different. At breakfast, their parents spoke casually, unaware of the storm raging in the silence between Nick and Noah. Plates clinked, coffee poured, words floated around the table. But underneath it all was a current so strong it threatened to break the surface at any second. When Nick's hand brushed Noah's as he passed her the milk, it was like fire again. She flinched, he hesitated, and for a moment, Their parents almost noticed, almost dot, and that became the rhythm of their new reality. Secrecy and danger. Every glance stolen in hallways, every accidental touch, every moment of silence when they were left alone, it all carried the weight of the kiss. They weren't just fighting their feelings anymore. They were fighting the truth. And the truth was merciless. The guilt never went away. Noah tried to bury it under anger, telling herself it was Nick's fault that he had pulled her into this. Nick tried to bury it under arrogance, telling himself he could handle the fallout, that nothing scared him. But when their eyes locked, all the walls crumbled. Because guilt and fear can't erase desire. They can't erase love. That kiss had changed everything. It had broken the rules of their world. It had turned siblings into lovers, rivals into soulmates, and their house into a battlefield of secrets. There was no going back. The kiss wasn't just a moment, it was a spark. And sparks don't die quietly. They burn, they spread. They consume everything in their path. Nick and Noah knew what was coming. More danger. More lies. More nights where they had to choose between silence and truth, between family and desire. But deep inside, both of them also knew something else. No matter how much it cost, no matter how impossible it seemed, they wouldn't stop. They COULDN single quotes to dot because sometimes one kiss doesn't just change a story. It rewrites it, and for Nick and Noah, their story had only just begun.